Help! YouTube's coming for my ad revenue! Help! Oh God! Hey, KBash here to critique the Bioshock franchise and farm dislikes. Now, if you don't care for spoilers, would you kindly frick off? If you haven't heard the name Bioshock, you've definitely seen this picture before. The franchise is a bit of a cultural landmark in gaming, and at the time, groundbreaking aesthetic treasure rife with creativity and character. So why am I here? I dismissed Bioshock back in 2007 as another shooter with horror elements. Granted, that description is hardly accurate, and my dismissal was unfair. Flash to 2019, and I've recently played the entire series back to back, DLCs included. I want to examine if the games are worth playing post-release, if they're just relics in time, and look, I'm here to capture the experience. If the franchise really is a feat, it'll speak for itself, yeah? I get it, Bioshock was a towering feat of video game artistry, okay, that's a given, and that's a valuable perspective, but enough people already did that video. Go read IGN reviews if you want that shit, we're doing KBash, baby! Let's go! I'm walking into this retrospective with one major bias. I'm not much of an FPS player. People point out that it's not really a pure FPS, but it's an FPS at the core. Now, my experience with Bioshock as a franchise followed a bit of a parabola. Yeah, kinda like that. Bioshock 1 is equal parts meandering, exciting, excruciating, electrifying, and pretty good. But I've gotta be honest, the game's a bit rough around the edges. I won't lie, the early game was hampered by unfamiliarity and an absolute myriad of little gameplay annoyances that added up way too fast, and I feel like it gets away with it because of the story it tells. The game follows the player character and his infiltration of the immense power struggle between the founder of the world's only underwater city, Andrew Ryan, very clever, and the working class hero, Atlas. Rapture's been spiraling out of control with free market capitalism and the practice of splicing, injecting oneself with Adam, a chemical that can rewrite one's genetic makeup. So, you know, lightning hands. Telekinesis, apparently. Bee hands. Alright, the stage is set, let's talk Bioshock 1's gameplay. The intro to Bioshock has the player surviving the trials of a decaying city with weapons everywhere and almost no ammo to go with it. You're constantly starved for bullets and cash, and it becomes more about survival than gunplay. You'll find yourself digging through every stray room, every corner for a bit of cash, for some goddamn lead. Bioshock tricks the player in this way. Regardless of your interest or attachment, you're effectively going to explore the city out of necessity, and pick up the audio logs with consumable lore vignettes and world building scattered throughout. It's both a strength and a weakness that the world seems organic, not designed for the player but rather in spite of them, in that the world is much more believable but not always tightly designed for encounters. But then, one of Bioshock's strengths is the freedom it gives the player in tackling encounters. They don't need to be meticulously designed like a screen in Castlevania if the options are manifold. And the aesthetics are the draw, right? This is an exceptionally creative environment for the 360. Shame about all those FPS drops, probably should have played the PC version. But where creativity is literally built into the foundation of the world, the gunplay is just flat. I was kind of surprised to discover, in a world of bee hands, an array of guns so standard if you ground them up into cream they'd come out vanilla. Not to mention that the enemies are excessively jittery, run around like lunatics, or just get in your face all the time, and it hardly feels like these are the weapons you need for the job. You can upgrade them piece by piece at these one-shot stations, which I like. It feeds into the player choice narrative the game is selling, but some of these weapons are far and away better than others, and they very rarely feel good to use. Not to mention juggling multiple ammo varieties and having to reload every time you swap, which might make sense, but certainly isn't fun. Forum posters seem to agree. Gunplay is and was suspect in Bioshock 1. Gunplay's only part of the story though, as plasmids or magic powers supplement your loadout. These start out strong and fall off later, but the gist is this. Lightning costs too much, fire's okay, and ice can get you through the game if your aim sucks, so ice it is. Ice and melee to be specific. I found myself just whacking dudes to death 90% of the time early on just to ensure survival. Yes, you lose the ability to loot shattered corpses, and yes, that's probably why I was so poor, but I struggled without it until the midway point. Also, I couldn't stand that completely obnoxious, automatic, and often poorly timed magic power, Eve, refill animation. Apparently you can cancel it by quickly swapping to a weapon, but I found that out too late for it to matter. Seems like they should have just let you toggle it in the options menu. At least the game conditions you to survive in your own way. Speaking of customization, you get these tonics, which translates to passive buffs on your character. Some of them suck, some of them are auto-pick or you're an idiot. Tonics are good for enabling player choice once again, but a lot of them fall into the useless dubious quality, or too good to leave category, and I feel like it's a fledgling system. In fact, most of the character's specialization options, like gun upgrades and other choices, will more or less result in a character that exists in the same muddy, customized space as any other players. You are, till the end, and regardless of choice, a jack of all trades, something that System Shock fans of yore weren't pleased about. You know, I've only mentioned the one flow break, as I'll call it, in Bioshock's gameplay. I just want to bring up the camera for a minute. So there's a point where you get a camera to do research by taking pictures of the city's meth heads. Research is important. The more you do it, the stronger you get, and the more bonuses you have against Rapture's denizens. The camera is extremely abusable, and if you've been having a harder time in the game, you have no reason not to abuse it. So snap away. Snap until the game balance snaps with it. The system was employed with good intentions, but that's going in the cringe compilation. I've neglected to mention this until now, but hacking is absolutely the pile of stupid hippopotamus. Why do people like this system? You hack way too much. Yes, hacking is a player choice and not mandated, but Bioshock leaves you tight on resources often enough that you'd be stupid not to hack everything in sight. So you do this stupid minigame, this same exact one you're looking at on every turret, every drone, every vending machine in sight, and the devs are like, no, it's fine. It breaks up the arduous task of having to actually play our shooter. No, seriously, I hacked like, what, 10 times in the first hour of play? It grinds the game to a halt, and by the way, the world shouldn't stop time so some asshole can link up juice tubes to hack sophisticated machinery. And why isn't the pseudo-stealth mechanic not applied directly with this one? Moving on, the game has a pretty weak selection of enemies, but that doesn't matter. They're sufficiently challenging without 10,000 more variables brought into the mix. What's weird is the bosses and sub-bosses. The game sets up a main enemy for each level, generally speaking, and most of them are just souped up normal enemies. They get a cutscene here and there that makes them spooky, but then they just die like anyone else and barely have any character. Sander Cohen bucks the trend, as most players will know, by having a long-lasting, impressive level with a self-contained plot. He himself rivals the charisma of Ryan, but in madness rather than adherence to personal creed, and yet this boss fight is anything but impressive and charismatic. It's a run and gun against a stronger Houdini splicer. Okay? Bioshock was never known for its bosses. The big daddies, however, matter. They don't attack on their own, the player must choose to engage or leave them be. They're harrowing early on, and while the difficulty is severely reduced later, you've probably been mashed in enough by the early ones to take them seriously. Riffing on a point about level design being organic, the big daddies roam the levels and you'll have to take them on either where and when you find them, or lie in wait after setting a trap. They seem to be the most common cause for player praise regarding the Bioshock experience, and it checks out. Who wouldn't feel good after feeling unprepared to fight them early game and then having a full plan of attack and masterfully annihilating every single one you come across afterwards? And you're gonna want to kill them for the little sisters and the atom they carry. After all, you can't get any of those power-ups, minus the gun upgrades, without it. The morality system in Bioshock is a bit limited and more appropriately viewed from a narrative perspective, so let's get through this quick. When the big daddy dies and its bonded little sister is left, you can harvest the thing, and the game will try to tell you they're no longer human, or save them, turning them human. Harvesting, or as we like to call it at the KBash show, turning them into a fucking slug will get you a large amount of atom. Saving them results in significantly less. However, the game rewards the player with gifts to sweeten the deal for every 3 saved. In short, saving is a completionist task, and harvesting will net in an easier, dirty playthrough. Saving them will result in a flat ending sequence where you did the good thing, have a good ending. Harvesting more than one will result in a bad end. The moral structure of the endings is literally do bad thing twice, evil forever, only do good and you're good. It's reductive. I mentioned narrative. Atlas will tell you to harvest them. Tenenbaum will tell you to save them. Andrew Ryan will tell you a man chooses, a slave obeys. So what's it gonna be? I said the choice should be viewed narratively because the morality of the thing is trite. The entire game is about choice. You choose how to engage, what to upgrade, what plasmids to use, all that fun junk, but ultimately you're strung along a very linear plot that peaks when you reach the office of Andrew Ryan. The sequence was, for me, a player with very little investment in the game up until this point, one of the highest emotional points in any game I've ever played. Andrew Ryan handing you his murder weapon, seizing control of his destiny, a man chooses, a slave obeys. Even if I don't think it comes from an objective place, I can see why people remember this game and laud it like they do. The revelation that Atlas has manipulated you because of your character's childhood mental conditioning, the notion that, of course you could hack Rapture technology, you were Ryan's illegitimate son, of course you could handle yourself in Rapture, it's where you were born, is immensely powerful. And not just that, but it's been there the entire time. The game has the audacity to wave completely obvious hints in your face all the way until the reveal, including the infamous trigger phrase, says, "Would you kindly?" Even that the player can control the bathyspheres even though the entire city is in lockdown mode, only Ryan should be able to control them, and it makes you take a step back as a player and say, "God damn, I got played." It's brilliant, and as far as twists go, it's my favorite in all media. So I was officially hooked on Bioshock, hungry for more twists. The gameplay annoyances didn't disappear, but became background noise. The game goes on for a bit longer, but unfortunately starts to tank near the end. Plasmids and guns get weaker as enemy splicers' health skyrockets. Hacking only gets harder, so stocking up on instant hack tools becomes almost mandatory. If you like, you know, not wasting your time on that shit. The charismatic antagonist is replaced with a thug. Atlas was Frank Fontaine all along, a cutthroat businessman, and little else. By now, some of the level design is getting weaker, big daddies melt to traps and electricity, and eventually you get to the least fun section, the entirety of the ending sequence. The little sister escort mission is dumb and overlong, and everybody knows it. The obnoxious fisheye lens didn't help. The final boss, like, they want to make Fontaine out like some criminal mastermind who has multiple identities for the purpose of overthrowing Ryan, which he succeeds in. With what devious strategy does he dispose of you after stopping your heart fails? Okay, maybe they were just going with the criminal mastermind is a thug in reality and got backed into a corner idea. I like the ending where you take over the world. Who's got time to adopt like 20 kids and raise them all? Nobody's got the money for that. Splice up, take over the world, you got the nukes. Let's go. Honestly, Bioshock 1 was messy. Despite all the praise I just lumped on it, the pervasive issues still make it hard to play today, especially with the sequel existing. It's what I call a coming-of-age game, something I'd liken to Final Fantasy Tactics, a game that hit an intellectually impressionable market. After all, I was like 16 when this came out, with philosophical concepts and adult themes, and in this case, a decent plot that really left an impression on the people who played it. Like, goodness, Bioshock gave me the big brain pee-pee. Me love Bioshock. Unfortunately for me, I'm older. I knew about objectivism long before I played Bioshock. So when the game comes out with names like Atlas and Andrew Ryan, Jesus, game, you don't gotta punch me in the fucking face. I believe the online discourse surrounding Bioshock 2 is irreparably poisoned by those who are more interested in how a game made them feel versus how a game actually plays. Because if games were judged purely on their mechanics, game feel, pacing, and the like, Bioshock 2 would stand a full head and shoulders above its predecessor. In a phrase, it got done dirty. Bioshock 2 is handed to another studio, though under the same 2K umbrella in a different part of the country with a different team. The game was never going the same direction as the first, and yet for each of its letdowns, it brings the gameplay to a place that I believe is the best in the series. Let's break it down. Bioshock 2 puts you in the role of one of the first big daddies. It plays up the intro with overtly dramatic moments that seek to capture the magic of the previous game. Ultimately, however, you are the reawakened Subject Delta, the villain is some pretender called Sophia Lamb, and you're out to find the little sister you were bonded to nearly a decade ago, Eleanor. The first thing you'll notice, aside from the 10 years decay in a city already ravaged by conflict, is the drill. Oh yes, you're a big daddy and the devs want you to know you're about to have fun, so have at it. The weapons in the game are all familiar yet distinctly made by Rapture, like they should have been to begin with. Drilling people to death is awesome. Drill dashing people is even more awesome. Harpooning people to the friggin' wall is awesome. You want to switch ammo types? Just hit the button. Nice. The upgrades are meteor too. Having a machine gun whose bullets ricochet off the walls, it's something you gotta experience, man, and since they increased the number of upgrades to 3 with that final special upgrade locked behind the first 2, the game wants you to invest in your favorite weapon, you know, specialize in something. Oh, and is that dual-wielding plasmids and guns? Yeah, shouldn't have to say it, but this is so obvious it floors me Bioshock 1 didn't have it. One in each hand just makes sense and feels so much better, you know, not having to constantly swap mid-firefight. It vastly improves the combat. The plasmids in general feel great with their upgrades producing alternative effects or granting new abilities when charged, while powering up the initial quick cast. In short, they make way more of a splash. AoE explosions instead of single target immolation, chain lightning, which, come on, dude, chain lightning! The camera has been nerfed and takes videos now, so no longer will you be forced to spam a shitty game mechanic to accrue an unfair advantage against the game's enemies. The tonics are still present, but they don't lock you into 6 per type. You can focus on combat, engineering, whatever you want, and freely. Lastly, and it's my absolute favorite change of all, hacking is completely different, now being a timing-based minigame that is non-intrusive and happens in real time. So now you can't just run up to turrets willy-nilly, you gotta plan that shit. Or from the cover of darkness, you can remotely hack with a hacking dart, which, while silly, is so much better. So many times in Bioshock 1, tripping an alarm or taking damage from a failed hack just ruined everything, or got you killed. In Bioshock 2, failing and tripping the alarm kicks your ass into high gear to succeed before getting shot to death. I tripped it a number of times and managed to stop the alarm by successfully hacking right after, and it's so satisfying, dude. Speaking of satisfying, exploration is improved in this installment with its expanded levels, incorporating a lot of multi-leveled segments that give you so much more room to explore, so much stuff to find. But I want to be here because I'm having fun playing Bioshock with my big-ass drill. I want to be here in this rundown, overgrown, dilapidated hellscape, which coincidentally is even more organic than the first because of the general state of ruin. Anyway, you're gonna have to explore the levels thoroughly because of the mild changes to the Big Daddy harvest save system. So 3 Big Daddies per level, harvesting nets a short-term burst, but this time saving them is so worth it, especially for completionists. The rewards you get for saving 3 are, again, fairly substantial, but you unlock tonics by saving them that decrease the loss of Adam and saving the girls, to the point that you should really just save them. If you choose to, however, there's gonna be some consequences. You're gonna want to do the harvesting dead bodies for Adam with the Little Sisters roleplay adventure twice per sister, which involves protecting the girls from waves of screaming meth heads, and honestly, doing it 6 times per level can be a little daunting, especially when ammo is low. I made it through every single one in the game, and it's just because I was having fun. So much fun, and refused to get the bad ending, fearing another stern talking to by a minor character. If you deal with all the Little Sisters in the level, you're gonna have to fight the Big Sister. More like big ripoff, am I right? An extremely agile and obnoxious opponent you'll take great pleasure in having fun with. What's important is the moral decision making is impacted by how advantageous it is saving the girls. It's unfortunate, but the game is trying to sell a different story now. Not one about willpower and choice, but about being a spite-ridden once-person consumed by rapture and its madness, or being a pillar of sanity and even forgiveness. It's not the strongest narrative, but at least it's deliberate in execution. I genuinely believe the story gets a bad rap for a couple of legitimate reasons, and some, nostalgic ones as well. The game simply can't live up to the last narratively. It's the story of a hard done by everyman and some sophist pseudo-socialist sociopath Sophia Lamb. Lamb isn't there. She isn't half as oppressive as Ryan. She can't hold a candle to Ryan. She seemingly says whatever she wants, manipulates the populace, exists as an idea, but not as much as Ryan, whose belief in the individual feels like it can be taken to a far more villainous place than belief in the collective. But there is no twist, not really, no great rug sweeping, and while the game peppers levels with side characters and, in general, more of a personal hand in things by allowing the player to choose who lives and who dies, those things pass without making a real impact. No, the story serves the narrative, which again is far more man versus monster than free will. The ending segment is absolutely packed with action, and comboing plasmids and your upgraded guns keeps the blood pumping all the way to the end, something the last game couldn't do, but retains the frame rate issues. Here, the little sister you've been hunting for, Eleanor, all grown up, joins you, summonable with a plasmid. She absolutely trashes anything on screen, and that sucks, because while it's a neat payoff, she's just killing everything, dude. Eleanor is the game's ending and moral system made manifest. If you've chosen revenge, she'll ice her mother in the end, and vice versa. The game actually allows for somewhat neutral choices and other variations in how events play out, based specifically on your playthrough, which is a much needed touch. How the game actually ends, needless to say, is much more of an ending than Bioshock 1's, and strongly tied to the narrative. It's more powerful than expected. But 2 is about being a good father, yeah, not merely being a great man. I'll sum up Minerva's Den, the game's standalone DLC, in a few short sentences. You're another Big Daddy uncovering the tale of one of the only good people Rapture would ever know. You travel through a surprisingly condensed and cleanly packaged piece of Rapture that can only be described as quality DLC. Everything you could ask for, even a new gun and plasmid. Audio logs and lootables are everywhere, and the story almost made me cry. When people talk about this piece of content, they often say it should have been Bioshock 2's main story, bringing back the infamous Bioshock twist and containing actually worthwhile emotional content. But it brings only the promise of what could have been, and no major changes otherwise, so I'll say if you haven't played it, just play it. It's as good as any part of the main game with an actual story backing it up. In the end, I get why Bioshock 2 isn't favored by fans. It isn't as culturally significant as the first game, yeah, and I can't argue with that. I can argue, however, that this game improves Bioshock's mechanics enough that if you were gonna go back to play Bioshock, I'd say just play Bioshock 2. You want fun? There it is. Oh, you want story? Oops, you already know the first game's story, uh-oh. Oh, it's not timeless, it's a plot twist with some average story beats. Uh-oh, there's the dislikes. Okay, this is uncomfortable. Bioshock 1 was lauded by critics and generally treated like piss by disappointed System Shock fans for lowering the skill floor of their game. Bioshock Infinite took the skill floor even lower, and somehow it's a cornerstone of gaming culture. At this point, I'm thinking the market is controlled purely by the emotions of the impressionable. You know, actually, I'm starting to see a pattern here. I may like Bioshock 2 best, but it's hard to find things to say about the game by comparison to 1 and Infinite. Those two games bring the conversation, and I think that's what really makes them big. Infinite has an exceptionally convoluted plot that we'll get to later, but you play as Booker DeWitt, you've been hired to find a girl named Elizabeth, you're in Columbia instead of Rapture, the 1920s city in the sky that's far too similar to past games to be a spin-off. So about that skill floor, Infinite is a great mass appeal consumer product. It's got no number in the title, a fresh start for buyers, strong branding and eye-catching world building, and simplified gameplay akin to the leap from Fable 1 to Fable 2. Also, you can zip around on sky rails or whatever. The guns are pretty standard fare. You upgrade them at the machine. Unfortunately, you can only carry 2 at a time. Oh good. Given there's a narrative purpose for this, but still, that's not Bioshock. I held off on upgrading guns because I never knew if I'd have ammo for the next section for my favorite guns. Kind of a shitty gameplay pattern there. Plasmids are good, but mostly serve to enhance the gunplay, especially early on. A lot of plasmids, vigors, are focused on controlling swarms of enemies, more than tearing through them. So yeah, they get better later, but you're gonna be a gunslinger for a while. And as for dumbing down, dude, you get Murder of Crows here like immediately. Watch as I barely even try to aim and immediately crowd control the entire room. Like, come on, man. Tonics have been removed and replaced with 3 bottles. You get the choice of improving your health, salts, or magic bar, and shield capacity. They put a fucking regenerating shield in my Bioshock. I'm sorry? Even a run button? Damn, guys, really trying to corner that shooter market, huh? Okay, so really, tonics have been replaced by gear, but you only get 4 pieces at a time, and most of them don't impact the basic flow of combat, not unlike tonics, and provide passive buffs. I think what I disliked about them is having to find every last one, not being given the option to buy them like the tonics of old, never really having to interact with the system, being limited to 4, you know. So hacking is gone. It's just gone. Not terribly sad to see it go, just mad to see the function of the hacking tool was replaced with the all-powerful possession plasmid. One shot in the vending machine will give you a coin. Hella lit, my dudes. Turn powerful machines against foes with a single button. And you need to, because there's turrets everywhere. It's really very fun. Big daddies and little sisters, big sisters, saving and harvesting, all that is gone, so just suck that soul out now, Infinite. Also, the game is incredibly linear, more so than any other Bioshock title. I'm still mad. Not to mention, the game is solidly a shooter now. This is, for sure, not an adventure game, or whatever fans called Bioshock 1 and 2. You do some looting, and some exploration, but mostly you're traveling between firefights. You kill so many goddamn people, it's shocking that this even has the franchise's name advertised on the box. I'm not done. So many firefights, so many bullets pass from you to other people. The battles drag on so much from start to finish. Is this pedantic enough yet? I'm trying to illustrate how fucking annoying constant firefights are in a Bioshock game. I don't know why this all pisses me off so much. Allegedly, some fans were mad that Bioshock 2 was more Rapture instead of somewhere else. So those dudes got what they wanted. A new location with a really flaccid take on the franchise. But all those gameplay simplifications were mandatory, if you can believe it or not, because the conceit of the narrative is you can't really change the outcome of things. You can only make slight variations here and there with minor decisions. Kind of like the butterfly effect, but trash. Props to the writers for always sticking to the narrative, but was it worth it though? Absolutely it was. This game's sales figures are ludicrous. I can whine about integrity all I want, but it hardly holds up to 2K's Andrew Ryan-esque view of how to handle their intellectual property. So let's talk marketing, aesthetics, characters, and the like. I used to think of Elizabeth as male gamer wish fulfillment, this whimsical free spirit type meant to engender affection in the player, which, given the reception, is exactly what she accomplished, but she's also one of gaming's first, or at least foremost, women characters that doesn't exist entirely for you. At least that's the idea. She joins you in battle by hiding behind things and chucking health, ammo, whatever at you just in time via quicktime event. Eventually it becomes a bit of a crutch, and at times she'll just have nothing for you, leaving you dead and pissed off. She's a convenience game mechanic, which is great because during the story she's anything but a convenience. You find yourself chasing after her, just wanting to talk things out. She's on your side, she's hitting you with a wrench. I think they tried to characterize her as human and not complicit with your violent behavior, but it starts grating about the second time it happens. To make her the exceptional woman woman character, they had to give her sneering dialogue about how you can't pick locks, which is effectively the only purpose she serves out of combat, and she can only do it if you tell her to. Like, I have fire hands, man, back off. I don't know, I see why people like her, but if that's all gaming can offer women, we can ask for more, right? Like, there's gotta be a compromise between damsel and annoyance. She also has godlike power, because obviously, and can tear rifts in the universe open. You can open and close them with a command, getting free health packs on demand, cover from gunfire, again, convenience. So that's the premise of Infinite, and the explanation for the title. Infinite universes exist, and Elizabeth is important because she can bridge two universes via rifts. So some words on the significance of this. Aside from the gameplay that neatly fits into this narrative bit, the level design itself is constructed often with symmetry in mind. Noah Caldwell-Gervais points this out in his video, and I found a Reddit post with a similar notion. Looking back on the levels, yeah, you can go one way or another. Stairs are divided by banisters, forcing you to choose. Go on this skyline or that, and it's an interesting construction that bridges the narrative and gameplay. Sure, the team deserves credit for that. It's also not on the nose, so subtle it almost gives you that Bioshock 1 twist feeling when it comes to light. Speaking of on the nose things, the story is peppered with two recurring characters, Tweedledum and Tweedle-f***ass here, who show up to offer statements about relativity, and it's all very clever. Except no, it's not. Having two basically omnipresent, omnipotent dweebs follow you around to dump exposition is the kind of thing I'd expect of some shitty Netflix special comedy about badly misinterpreted multiple worlds theory. But ignore them. Look at the pretty places. Infinite is beautiful. It deserves to be mentioned. I feel like the game got away with so much nonsense because, like Bioshock 1, it inspired a certain pathos in the audience, though for different reasons. When you first get to Columbia, feel that bloom effect burning your retinas and hear that gospel hum in the cathedral, you think, like a certain article in the past, that video games can be art. And then you just start killing. The world building, however, is paper thin. Things exist because they were in Rapture. Vigors? No drawbacks. No real functionality in society because, most of them are violent and terrifying. Nobody uses them except a few enemies. Nobody overdoses on salts or goes crazy and fucking deformed like in Bioshock. It's actually kind of pathetic how carelessly they're integrated into the world. It's interesting how much of the subplot, which is the vox populi and the working class revolution, etc., just exists in the background. When it does impact you, you feel mercenary in all of it, never really connected, just passing through. In fact, you could say that about a lot of the game. Working class people in Bioshock have been important since the beginning, but they've never been truly characterized. I understand the frustration with this game and how it handles both the revolution and the revolution's leader, Daisy Fitzroy, who you can sit and justify her madness and death all you want. She's still a working class revolutionary icon in the game, who gets reduced to child killer status. I see both sides on this one, but it's pretty weak that in a game set in the 20s of all times, this is the direction they went. As a footnote, the DLCs retcon this scene by adding context to her actions, but ultimately turned her into a plot device. I'm not sure what to say, but try to avoid messes like these when writing characters. I've heard some other interesting criticisms regarding the game. Both the aforementioned article and Matthew Matosis asked the same question. Why is Infinite a shooter? And yeah, with a gorgeous setting, all the interesting bits, couldn't it have been something else, like Myst or Riven or something? And I think the rebuttal is twofold and fairly obvious. Weaker answer first, this is a Bioshock game. The market has to be considered. It'd be nice if we didn't live in that world, and games could be made with integrity and shit, but I bet it wouldn't have sold half as well and wouldn't have been half as dramatic. Second, the narrative kinda demands it. Frequently the game calls Booker a savage, a violent man. He says he's a sinner. We don't know what he's talking about early on, so it's kind of annoying hearing it constantly. Elizabeth sees you defend yourself from an ambush by killing all your would-be murderers and runs off, decrying you as a murderer, and oh my god, you are. You've been killing tons of people up until now. Not even the splicers of yore, but hostile people. Booker is a veteran and a killer. It's all he knows. He gets hired to retrieve a heavily guarded and dangerous girl from atop a floating citadel. I think FPS is a pretty fair genre to give the game. Unfortunate though that may be for gaming as a whole. To be fair, even though you're killing real people, they have almost zero thoughts or feelings or lives or anything, unlike the splicers in Bioshock who were deluded, but at least talked to themselves about their lives. They existed instead of feeling like Matrix-like simulation automatons, only concerned with Booker. The racial content dripping off the walls is also a major subject of debate regarding this game, and I think the imagery really speaks for itself. Some have said that the story shouldn't contain this content without going all in on it, like actual realistic depictions of racial violence and hatred, and I can't help but think that the imagery is gross, is shocking a lot of the time. I don't think it needs to be expounded on, and I don't think it would have served the story anyway, which again has little to do with the background noise of Columbia, and more about the two main characters escaping it. In the end, the game departs from Bioshock 1. You can choose, but not really. You don't have people to save, children to save, even yourself to save, because in the end, you merely are, you will do, and the path leads to the same place regardless. You can change this or that, but the more things change, the more they stay the same. I'd recommend watching the Matthew Matosis review, again if you want the breakdown of the game's end sequence, which yeah, is trite and forced and ridiculous. The game passes the refrigerator test. You can finish the game as an average consumer, like it, go to bed, wake up in the middle of the night, go for a glass of water, and standing in that pale white light think, wait a minute. That didn't make any sense. It doesn't hold up to scrutiny, so it relies on the player not looking too closely. At the end of the game, I was just exhausted. So many levels went on for so goddamn long. By the end, I was expecting some big boss fight, and it never really came. It was a harder game than I expected it to be, and I can't help but wonder if that's because, with so many people dead and so much good dropped from the previous games, it's so easy to find this a cynical product of a once original studio. I miss Rapture. And there it is. It came with falsehood and chicanery. It promised Rapture, and it was Rapture. It had the weapon wheel after all, but there was no hacking. No bots or turrets to jack, fairly linear encounter outcomes. You get to slog through Rapture on minimal resources without the right tools, with Infinite's core weighing you down. And to top it off, the story was, at least in the first episode, absolutely the least interesting, perhaps most draining piece of utter tack I've seen in the franchise. To clarify, Infinite's ending sets up the possibility for Bioshock as a franchise to tell any kind of story, as long as it features a man, a city, and a lighthouse. Sure, whatever. Episode 1 of the DLC is a look back at Rapture before the fall. You meet Sander Cohen, because of course you do. You've got to save a little girl, because we're retelling Booker's original story here. And then Elizabeth reveals that, f*** you, you're the last remaining Comstock of Infinite Comstocks, or whatever. I hope you like how I went from mildly likable to complete psychopath for $10. The episode has drama, certainly, and questionable gameplay, but with Infinite representing a game of unfortunately checked ambition, it's sad to see additional content being largely without ambition. Not new, not original, not particularly fun, and even unpleasant. Now that's not the point of the episode, it's to set up the second, for $10. Episode 2 suffers from different issues. Stealth gameplay to the point of utter cheese, continued scarcity of all things with kill potential, and isn't Elizabeth all-powerful? Like at the end of Infinite, she effectively gained omniscience, right? So how can one big daddy kill her just like that? She knew this was coming, yeah? Or no, I guess? The plot necessitates so many questions, thanks to the unknown range of Elizabeth's capabilities that it comes off like inelegantly written tripe. Okay, I'm hammering on the last episode unfairly, at least in this one, she's showing herself off more, as a character, that is. I'm not a fan of the genius character trope in any context, and her just instantly grasping mathematical concepts and spouting science jargon is silly, but at least it contrasts with Booker. Now, what it succeeds at as DLC is wrapping Infinite more neatly into Rapture's arc, bringing familiarity back, constant references to the games that came before, hosting some of the most uncomfortable scenes I've ever seen in video games, and providing fan service. Like Minerva's Den, why wasn't this Infinite's story? Elizabeth is a character I've been both neutral and negative towards, but her fate in the last episode of the DLC is nothing short of horrific, and I'd encourage fans to at least watch a cutscene compilation or something. It's a shame the first episode wasn't as elegant as this one, but it was necessary for the story they were telling, I guess. And that's Bioshock. As a franchise, it really surprised me. I initially avoided it, not wanting to play more FPS games, but I came away with a lot of thoughts and criticisms stewing in my head, and I think that shows just how special it is. Very few games maintain that level of heated and interesting discourse for as long as these games have. Bioshock is absolutely worth playing nowadays, and well worth examination. It smacks of a franchise that hasn't been delved into even half as much as it could be, considering how popular it is. Apparently Bioshock 4 is in development. Bioshock has proven that you can change almost every facet of your franchise's gameplay, as long as you keep the core, and actually increase your sales. I'm scared that the fourth game will try to simplify the already low complexity gameplay and further Netflixify the writing, which 1 and Infinite were written by the same dude, so how'd that even happen? Still, go 2K. Go explore big concepts through the lens of video games and first-person shooters. Make something amazing. We're all waiting, man. Well, we sure had fun today. Now would you kindly click another video?